Greetings, future social workers. I want to say something to you. I'm so excited, right? I've been looking forward to saying this the entire semester, right? Congratulations on completing HIPSI 2 and your first year of the MSW program. Doesn't that feel fantastic to hear that? Doesn't that feel so great to know you have accomplished half of your journey, right? Pursuing your Master of Social Work degree. Folks, I want to say congratulations to you all. I am so excited and proud of each of you. I am wearing my formal Guayabera right today, the gray one that matches the gray hair in my beard, and a formality and a celebration of saying you have done a fantastic job persevering this year, pursuing your degree amidst a pandemic, right? Amidst challenging courses, I know, and yet you have persevered through all of that, including your practicum and personal lives. And now you are sitting listening to the final lecture, right, of year one for HIPSI 2. So congratulations. I am so excited and happy for you all. This is going to be a celebratory lecture, right? So what I'm going to do today is I have 3 more tools that I want to give you to add to your superhero belts, right? So that you've got those ready when you go out and change the world as social workers. And the other thing I'm going to do, if you've had my classes before, you know that there's an activity that I do at the end of each of my classes that is actually going to be the same for this course, because we have a combination of students who have been with me for a couple of the courses as well as new ones, and I want to provide the same opportunity. Also, we had students that weren't able to participate in the last activity, so I'm going to open that up again, all right, for this course. So if you have my class before, you know what we're to expect at the end there, right? And then finally, what we're going to do is we're going to end with some inspirational content, right, to send you off from HIPSI 2 and year one. So that's the plan for today, all right? So we'll go ahead and dive into our lecture, and let's get started. So the focus of today's lecture, let me just adjust my face here for a second for you all. Okay, the focus of today's lecture, the final lecture, lecture 6, is going to tackle community involvement and, of course, our course wrap up for today. I'm going to move through the material at a fairly quick pace. That way, what we can do is try to get you out. I know the lectures, some of them have been long, and I apologize for that, truly. There's just so much information that Dr. Lee Johnson and I want you to have as social workers when you close out, okay? But the benefit is you can always rewind this, right? You can always listen to it again. So this will be accessible to you. Let's just talk about some of the social problems that we've addressed in this time, right? In HIPSI 2. Let me move me down here for a second. So we've talked about a lot of issues, right? We've mentioned things like individuals without housing and serving the homeless, right? Citizenship, COVID pandemic relief services. You've talked about these even in some of your other classes, and I know we addressed some of them in Marge Pop's human trafficking, where mass incarceration, right, and the institutionalization of racism. And you're going to be learning about things like gentrification, and a little more about human trafficking in subsequent classes that you take in the MSW program. Particularly, you can have the option to take classes that have a focus in each of these when you choose your electives, right? So the key that I'm hoping that you take away from HIPSI 2 is that ultimately what you've done in HIPSI 2 is you've expanded your knowledge, right, of oppression that exists in our society throughout our world. And what you've learned through HIPSI 2 is that the circumstances that an individual may find themselves in are rarely just the individual's circumstances on their own. They're tied to larger social issues that occur at the macro level that require macro social workers to go out and advocate, assemble communities, direct communities, right? Point them in the right direction and give communities a voice, give people a voice whose voice has been taken from them in order to create a more just society, right? These are the problems that we have addressed, or you are soon going to hear addressed throughout the MSW program. You'll hear us continue to talk about them because they are significant and require macro work. I hope if you've left with some grain of appreciation for macro social work, maybe even you want to dabble in it throughout your career, I can tell you, come on board. I have absolutely loved every moment of macro social work, okay? And I still do. So something to consider. Now, I'd like to point our direction to ultimately, there's a list. There's an actual list for social workers of these social problems that I was discussing in a more sort of succinct, concrete a description of what we're trying to accomplish as social workers, particularly when doing macro work. These are referred to as the grand challenges for social work. This is an actual thing, folks, okay? So all you need to do is jump on Google, grand challenges of social work, and you're going to find this list. I want you to be exposed to this list because this is something that I teach and I address in our doctoral program, our Doctor of Social Work program, that you should become familiar with. So when I talk about macro social work and addressing these social issues, what I'm really talking about in social work language is addressing the grand challenges of social work. There are three categories for the grand challenges of social work, particularly focusing on individual and family well-being, stronger social fabrics, and creating a just society. And if you see here, there are categories, right, that fall under each of these, which definitely, right, involve social workers in addressing, tackling, and transforming the realities of these, the red pill, right? Remember, of what we've been talking about this entire semester. So things like, ensuring healthy development for all youth, right? Building healthy relationships to end violence. That would include things like intimate partner violence, right? Gang violence, things like that. Now, when we talk about creating a stronger social fabric, there's categories in here discussing ending homelessness, right? Using technology for social good, not for depleting the environment, right? Things like eliminating racism under a just society, building financial capability for all. Do you see the theme of what we were discussing in this course about toxic inequality, about the DuPont scandal, right? And all of these other things, environmentalism. You can see it all coming together, right? So ultimately, this isn't a slide we need to take a lot of time on, but I wanted to give you the language of social workers. So when folks sometimes in interviews may say, what grand challenge, right, motivates you in social work, you can pick one of these, right, and say, this is, or several. Hey, there's nothing wrong with that, right? And say, here's what I'm excited for. Right? Here's what I want to do. Here's where my heart is telling me I want to change the world. I want to address this grand challenge. All right, just something for you. So today, where your focus is going to be on community development. That's the overarching theme for today's lecture. And we're going to talk about those three tools I want to give you: needs assessment, focus groups, and asset mapping as tools to use to develop and organize efforts in a community. Why do we need to do that? Well, as you've seen, if you step into incomes that are, neighborhoods that are lower income, that are struggling, that have been plagued by institutionalized racism, poverty, whatever the case is, you know that many individuals look at the community around them, their own community that they live in, and they say, I want something different. I want something better. I want something more just for our community. The problem is I don't know where to start. The problem is no one has taught me cultural organizational theory, neoclassical theory, social learning theory, right? No one has ever given me the book, put the book of Pedagogy of the Oppressed in my hands. No one's talked to me about the distribution of wealth and power. All I know is this situation sucks as it is, and I want to change it, right? So this is the reason why community organizing and development is so important. You'll hear folks that work in unions talk about community organizing a lot. They actually have positions where social workers can actually be hired as well for community organizing. But there's a broader term that I want to discuss, and there's actually a difference between community development and community organizing. Okay, there's two different things. Either way, what we're doing is, when we're talking about community organizing and development, what we're really doing is, if you look at this bottom graph here, we're talking about organizing and also empowering, like we had discussed, remember, empowering groups, right, to build relationships, to take action within their community, to be educated about the issues that are going on, right, and to build this capacity and this notion of community. Remember what Father Greg Boyle said of radical kinship, right, and to develop leaders in order to create systems of power that lead to equity, right? Not lead to oppression. And so ultimately, there's two focuses between community development and organizing. One is community development is often focused on improving the situations that currently exist, the systems that exist, working with what you've got and making them better for everyone that lives around you. The second is community organizing. Now, when we're talking about Community organizing sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes community organizing can carry a different focus, which is on rallying people to overturn the oppressive systems that exist and replace those systems with more just systems. Now, sometimes students may ask me, Dr. Mexico, is one better than the other? Is one necessary over the other? And it really depends on the situation, is my response. Sometimes community development is completely appropriate. You don't need to dismantle, overthrow, disrupt an entire system, right? If it's partially working. A social worker's job isn't to go in and just decimate everything and start all over if there are elements of it that just need to be salvaged, revised, saved, okay? But when you're working in a system where we're talking about like Nazi Germany, institutional racism, things like this, there are going to be certain facets, systems within the society that we're discussing or that you're working with that do need to be either very radically transformed or perhaps replaced, okay? And so this is the notion of the difference between the two. Now, a tool that you're going to use when you step into a community, this community, remember we defined community in the last lecture, whether it be a church as a congregational social worker, whether it be a county, whether it be another country. Maybe you step into, you've never been to Jamaica and you have a heart for serving individuals and improving the situation and resources in Jamaica, and you step in. That's a hint because we're going to talk about Jamaica later, okay? And so what happens is you step in and you have no clue anything about the culture, the traditions, the needs, and the assets of a community. This is where you're going to want to talk about the ABCDs, okay, or the asset-based community development mentality of a social worker. So what we're going to do is, it's an easy way to remember it, ABCD, by asset-based community development. And this is what we're going to talk about. Now, the reason why we're saying asset-based community development and not just community development is this is speaking to a specific paradigm, if you will, a praxis, a combination of philosophy and practice and how we go about developing communities, and the mental mindset that we apply to it. Let me give you an example. You could step into a community and make judgments right away. You can say, oh, look at this community. Look at the awful schools. Look at all the tagging on the walls. Does anyone pick up trash? Why do we have so little resources? And you can come in judging, right? And coming from a deficit-based model and saying, here's what you all need to do. You all need to start picking up trash. You need to start behaving. Someone needs to get some different teachers up in here. And if you try to develop a community that way, you're not going to be very successful. That is not asset-based community development, okay? I'm going to distinguish those in a second for you. This is what asset-based community development looks like, the ABCDs, right? The foundation of this is based on 3 points: that everyone has gifts. Everyone. Remember the cracked pot story, right? Everyone has gifts. Everyone has something to give and contribute to society, and everyone has something, right, worth contributing that can promote the well-being of everything, of everyone else. And everyone cares about something, and that passion, right, is his, hers, or their motivation to act. Right? So everyone has a heart. Your heart led you to the MSW program. It led you to pursuing, wanting to attack a grand challenge of social work. Well, everyone else in a community has that too. The question is, has anyone taken time, invested in a relationship, listened to the community to draw forth that voice? Remember, making a voice heard. And so asset-based community development has a methodology applied to it. Remember, I said that it's a praxis, a combination of philosophy and practice. And so what we've got here is, in the ABCDs of development, what it looks like in terms of a process is discovering strengths of individuals and communities, organizing and mapping, meaning actually drawing out a plan, okay, with the community, all right, linking and mobilizing community resources, building relationships with one another, creating community-driven initiatives. Listen to this, not politician-driven initiatives, not big Fortune 500 corporate initiatives, not drawing forward Dr. Mexico's social work initiative, community-driven initiative, allowing voices to be heard, and then creating a sustainable process that one day when you step out of the picture, when you say goodbye to that community, right, that community is able to sustain itself and continue to empower, advocate, and create just change as a community. And amazing. How amazing is that as a social worker that you can be the hub, if you will, to the change that is occurring, right, in a community, in a family, right? This is what was rewarding for me about macro social work. So remember when I told you that some people come in with a deficit mindset and they want to come in and be all judgmental and saying this is what's not happening? Well, that's referring to a previous like outdated form of what we called international development. Okay. And so if you notice, there's a difference between the old school mentality of community development and the asset-based community development that we're asking you to adopt. And not only because it's just good practice, it's backed by research, but this is considered the standard now for social work. This is where we want to be, right? If we're not doing this, we're not doing it well, okay? So I'm not going to read all of these to you, right? But typical international development, what it talked about was that it was a deficit-based model. We went in and said, oh, right? Your lawn is non-existent. Your schools are poor, right? Your graffiti and gang violence is atrocious. No, we don't talk about that. We talk about what's working in this community. We have some hardworking individuals, right, that are coming in and getting up and working 14-hour days, 3 jobs because they care about their children and they want to put food on the table. We're talking about individuals who are artistically talented, who, yes, have maybe been through horrendous amounts of trauma, but are looking to express themselves and bring their voice forward through their art and through their music, right? So these are strengths to be celebrated, to be tapped into, not deficiencies, right? Charity and favor orientation is different from investing and rights orientation. So what I mean by that is, looking at the community as a helpless sort of entity that needs, oh, you need help, let me come in and help you, I feel so bad for you, and the pity piece, and saying, I hear you all have an opinion about this. I want to hear your opinion. And here's what I want to do. Rather than a bunch of people coming into your community once a year, picking up trash, right, and giving you food, what if we created a more just and equitable society where you have the opportunity, right, to create a clean, safe neighborhood for you all together, right? And you have a right to the food, to the clothing, right, to the dignity that other communities have because you are human beings and believe it too. What if we work together to create those circumstances every day and not just on Christmas, right? That's something to consider. So if you see, there's a very contrasting approach to how we do things. One more aim in the traditional approach is to fix people, and the aim is to develop the potential in people in the ABCD model. Do you see how important this fixture is of social work? Again, I want to tie us into one of our previous lectures when Father Greg Boyle had said, right, that ultimately we are responsible for one another. It is not that as social workers, we step in, aren't excited about saving people. We are excited about getting to know another person for their humanity. And in the process of doing that, we will create conditions where we honor the humanity of one another, right? That's the focus of ABCD mapping. Now, enough of all of that. I want to make sure that we move along in the lecture today. So you've already covered ABC asset based community development, right? And the model, the mentality, and the practice behind it. Now let's talk about the practice. How do you do that then, right? You step into a community. What do I do? What's in my belt to help me with that? Well, one is conducting needs assessment surveys. So at times you're going to go in, and remember when I said you want to hear the voice of the community, a needs assessment survey is really an opportunity to literally give the community a voice, to do it in a way that's very deliberate, but also saves a little bit of time, and you get that information concretely. Let me give you a very baby micro example of that, right? Every time I do a training, a speaking event, something like that, I do a brief survey. The reason why I do that survey is because I want to tap into a little bit of the experience and opinion of the group that I just spent all this time with, sharing, right, my thoughts. And the reason I want to do that is because I want to know, how can I improve to be better? What were the needs of the community as I understood them going into the event, and how close did I come to meeting the needs of that group when I was done? Macro social work is very similar to that when conducting a needs assessment survey. So a needs assessment survey basically is a pre-list set of questions that you're asking the community to answer related to a specific topic, right? So it has a predetermined sample. This isn't something that you just do on the fly. You actually want to be very deliberate in prepping a needs assessment survey because it's done usually by interview over the phone or in person, okay, or in a written response form. Any of these are acceptable, but what you want to do is make sure that maybe you even use multiple forms of a needs assessment survey in order to draw the voice out from multiple folks. So maybe some folks are willing to come in and they've had the time to do an in-person interview. Maybe some folks want to do it by phone, but they don't have time for that because of work. So if you shoot a quick questionnaire out, you might elicit more responses. So it's just something to think about, right? And the results need to be tabulated, summarized, distributed, discussed, and used. Again, you've heard me say this multiple times in this course. Anytime you seek feedback from a client, a community, a group that you're working with, if you fail to discuss and use the feedback that you have received, you are creating conditions of frustration for that group or that community or that organization. Folks want to be heard, but they want to know that their voice actually went somewhere. Right. So it's important to understand that whatever you do, you've got to create those key points that emerged from the survey and circle back with your community to discuss, thank you for your time. Here's what I've learned, right? Some of you may have seen me do a mini sample of that where I ask you for feedback, right? And I send a survey out mid-course, before the mid-course evaluation. I'm checking in with you on how the course is going. You're letting me know, and I say, thank you for letting me know. Here's like the top 2 or 3 things that emerged from your all survey, right? And here's what I want to do to address that for you. It's the same thing, okay? So let me move my face out of the way here. Why should you do a needs assessment survey? There's several reasons why you want to do this. One is to learn more about your community. So you're going to be, as social workers, dropped into circumstances because you're the superhero, right? But you don't always know the landscape of what you've been dropped into. And that's okay. That's normal, right? You use your people skills, your social skills to do that. But what's going to happen is you might want to conduct a survey to say, can I get to know y'all a little bit? Right? Can you share some bits of information about yourselves and your community so that we can get to know each other, right? There's a couple of things here to document your needs when you're talking about doing a needs assessment survey. Oftentimes it'll be tied to a larger project, right? So if a city wants to open up a new service or let's say a new program for children in the community, they may ask social workers to go out and do needs assessment surveys to determine that the community actually wants that service, right? Before they go tying funding to it. Let's say a community needs a new school, right, in a certain area that didn't exist, where a school wasn't before. Well, the city may say, social workers go out, conduct a needs assessment survey. We want to find out, one, does the community want a school in that area? What do they envision a school in that area would look like, right? What are some of the resources that would be there? You're going to use this. So that's really important to document. So when you go back to the city and you're like, yes, I connected with such and such community, group of amazing people. We threw out the needs assessment survey. We got a total of 200 something responses back. Here's what the community has to say about that school. All right. To garner greater support, right? So when you're actually doing the survey, you're also creating awareness that someone is paying attention to it, right? This can create support. It can also create enthusiasm for the group, right? So if you're going in and talking about resources in schools or parks or something being built that's exciting, if you're talking about dismantling oppressive policy, then folks are going to say, hey, there's a social worker coming in and doing surveys about this. And what they're saying is that there's some discussion in the higher rungs of the community about how can we improve in these areas. You need to fill out the survey, come on board. Okay, so sometimes you'll see that there. And then what's obviously important is when you're creating change within a community, you want the community to be a part of it, right? So you want to involve as many people as you can in the subsequent action that's taking place. Right. So when you're building this survey, and please remember, like I say in every lecture, you're not going to come out here being an expert survey builder. That actually is a skill set in terms of the types of questions that you create, things like that. But this is just an overview today. So you have an idea of what to keep in mind as you're building, all right, surveys. You'll be exposed to this again throughout your career and in the work that you're doing. So you'll want to identify reasons for choosing to do the survey. You want to make those clear for all parties, right? So on the survey, you're probably going to say, thank you for your participation. We are conducting this survey to da, 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 and you want to be very specific, right? No one likes to be handed a survey where they're like, you're asking them all these questions and what is this for, right? I don't know you. I don't know if my information is going to be thrown out there. Am I going to be identified You want to be very clear in your goals as well, and you want to decide how much time you have to do the survey, right? So if you only have 2 week turnaround to make a decision or move forward on an action or decide what to do, probably a needs assessment survey is not going to be a best fit. You need time to prepare the questions, distribute them, follow up with folks, asking them that if they can please fill out the survey, right? And you also need time to receive the survey results and analyze them, right? So, and then you also want to determine who are you going to ask, right? If you are interested in building a new school in a historically low income marginalized area, or you really need to consider, right? Or at least the bulk of your opinion, should it be coming from those who are wealthy? Remember, we talked about the difference between rich and wealthy, right? Who don't live in the neighborhood. That would be very different, right? And the responses, I'm not sure would coincide with the voice, right, of the community who is discussing having the school there, right? So you want to decide that, and you want to decide who will be asked. Are these neighborhood individuals, children, parents, right? A combination of both, whatever the case is. Now, when you're conducting these needs assessment surveys, there's a plan here. I'm not going to read all these to you, but if you notice, I included this plan in here for you. I thought it would be helpful to see, right? This literally spells out how you go about creating the survey. It's pretty linear, it's pretty straightforward, and if you see, it's fairly easy to follow. The point with this is when I discussed in this one here, making sure that you have the time to do the survey. This is why, right? Because you're following all of these steps here. So just something for you to examine and check out later that I thought would help, right, for you to reference later on. There are instances where maybe the needs assessment survey isn't necessarily worth the time, right, that you're putting into it, and really won't serve much of an effect unless you're outside of these parameters. So if there's something that you know beyond a doubt that needs to get done to improve the circumstances of a community or group, then you just do it, right? You don't need to take time to do a survey, right? When it's too urgent and you need to act right now, it's a crisis moment where you need to intervene, then yes, you would do this. I mean, sorry, you would not do the community needs assessment. You would move forward with how you need to deal with an urgent matter, right? When an assessment has been done recently, it can be redundant and frustrating to a community when they have given you a voice, they have not heard back from anyone, and then someone else comes in and asks them again. Quite frankly, that is going to irritate community members, and rightfully so, right? Because they're saying someone came in and asked me for my voice. I said, great, I gave them my voice. I never heard anything back. And now someone else is coming. It makes us as social workers also look like we don't know what we're doing and that we're not connected. So you also, when you step into a community, you want to ask, has anyone asked you for input before recently, maybe within the last 90 days? And if so, can I connect with that person or the results of that feedback, right? So that I can learn a little bit more. And then you can go back and say, this is what I learned. Is this still applicable? Okay. And when the community would see an assessment as a redundant or wasteful, like I said, a use of resources and time, right? The second tool I want to share with you today is conducting focus groups. And so we're going to talk about what a focus group is. It's different from the town hall meetings that I discussed earlier, and we're going to talk about focus groups in particular, right? So let's talk about then, to add to your tool belt, first off, what is a focus group? And a focus group is a small group discussion guided by a trained leader used to learn more about opinions on a designated topic and then guide for future action. Focus groups, I participated in a lot of these. I've also led a few over the course of my career. Usually in macro social work, let's say the state of California, a system in the state of California, let's say child welfare, is thinking about rolling out a new policy, right? Significant piece of legislation or policy that will sort of change the game for children and families throughout the entire state. It's not uncommon that focus groups will start to trickle down, not only from the state, but from the state to the counties to the cities and the communities, right? And not only to families that may be impacted, but also to practitioners, such as other social workers, therapists, directors, things like that. The reason for that is because there is a tremendous amount of research that tries to go into creating this policy to determine what is the best way to map the policy that will impact everyone. So that's a basic example of that, right? So how do focus groups differ from regular groups, because remember we talked about like group therapy and groups and things like that in social work in previous lectures. Well, focus groups are only addressing one specific topic. It's one thing. Maybe that is poverty as it relates to like, let's say, determinants for physiological development in children, right? How does poverty impact a child's physiological development, biological development? Maybe that's the focus of the group, okay? Or maybe the focus of the group is how, let's say, gang violence, right, is impacting school performance, okay, something like that. So there's a trained facilitator that comes in and leads the discussion. Guess what? One day you will be that trained facilitator. That's what many social workers do, all right, in these focus groups. And then what happens is members of the group are encouraged to talk openly about their opinions and respond to other members. This is the process. Rather than doing a survey and tapping into individual thought, you do this in a group, and it's a focus group because it's focused on one thing. So when you use a focus group, or when you should use one, is when you're considering introducing a new program or service, just like I said, something that maybe isn't there, that hasn't existed before, but is new and you want to bring in. When the main concern is depth or shading of opinion. So you think that people want it, you have a pretty good feel on the pulse, but you're not 100% sure. You want to dive deeper, focus group would be good. And when you want to ask questions that can't easily be asked or answered in a written survey. So, when you're talking about the impact of poverty and biological development, or how community violence impacts school performance, that's tough to do with like a Likert scale of 1 to 5, right? So what you're doing is, instead, is you may want to do a focus group and allow longer amounts of time for folks to sit down, right, and discuss what's going on with that group. So this is another guide that I'm not going to read to you all, right? I know you all can read, where you can refer to this in the future for when you're leading a focus group and preparing to do that. What do you need? There's a couple of things I want to reiterate that you'll see some commonalities, though, between some of the other interventions that I offered you this semester. You see these two? Find a good leader and find a good recorder. Do you see how they're both there? That's not a shared position. It's not one person doing both. You've heard me say this before, and I just want to reiterate, please, please always make sure that when you're leading a focus group, or whatever you're doing when you're facilitating, you are facilitating 100%, and you've got a recorder there with you that can capture what has occurred in that meeting. You do not want to try to do both, because you'll miss the essence, right? And key critical points of what was shared during that meeting. Now, when you're conducting a focus group, when the group meets, you want to just follow these processes here. It's fairly straightforward. It's fairly linear, right? Linear. Make sure you're thanking people for coming. Be cordial, be polite, be clear in the purpose and goals. People are giving their time for a focus group. They've got children and work and jobs and maybe school themselves, right? So when someone shows up to a focus group, the last thing you want to do is waste their time. You want to invite them in. Thank you so much for coming. Thank you for your time. Look, we want to have a discussion with you all today about this topic. And the reason why we want to discuss this topic is because we're interested in taking your feedback to See how specific that is. So you want to make sure that folks are feeling like their time is appreciated. If you notice, you want to ask further questions in a general manner. You want to keep the questions sort of general to allow folks to share more than what they would on a written survey or on a quick phone survey, right? And you want to tell the group about the next steps that occur. Are you seeing the pattern that exists here, right? Follow-up is key as a social worker. We have to demonstrate through our actions that we're people of our word, right? So if we say we're going to do something, we need to do it, right? So that's important. After the meeting, it's important to make a transcript or a written summary of the meeting and examine the data for patterns, themes, new questions, and ultimately, what did we learn from this? What can we conclude from this meeting as a result of the time and opinions that people shared? And then what you want to do is circle back, right? Thank you all for conducting the meeting. There was a number of fantastic ideas that were shared. Here are the top 3 shares that we came away with after conducting 50 focus groups with over 200 participants total, right? This is what you would do. Following this meeting, here's how we intend to use the results. We intend on taking them maybe to City Hall. We intend on publishing them for future review and academic performance. We intend on requesting or including these in a proposal, right, to request funding for this project. But you want to follow up with the group. It's important to realize this too, because if communities continuously have focus groups going on and nothing ever happens from them, then less people are going to keep showing up to those focus groups, because they're like, they're just going to ask us some big questions. Nothing ever happens with it. I'm not giving my time. Really important. All right. Don't you think this slide is fancy? Is it moving for you on your screen? I hope it is. You can see all the little numbers. I was really proud of this because I was like, wow, getting fancy with the PowerPoint. Anyway, so the last piece that we're gonna talk about today is identifying community assets. Don't expect the very cool action, the movement here to play the animation in the next few slides. That's all I got. All right, so that's what we're working with today. And we're gonna finish with this, and then we're gonna close out with our activity, okay? And I'm gonna give you one quick example of mapping community assets um, uh, with a 6-minute film, okay? So I wanna show you that. First off, let's talk about community assets. When we talk about assets and what that means, let's define that from a social worker lens, right? So when we're talking about an asset in a community, what we're talking about is either a physical structure, a place like a building, right? An agency. It could be a business as well. Everyone that lives in the community is considered an asset. Remember, according to the ABCD model, everyone has something to contribute. So everyone is an asset. And guess what? You get to be a community asset too. You know why? Because you got your degree from CBU, because you took Dr. Mexico's Hip C2 class, because I'm hoping that you learned something in this class. And then guess what? You get to share what you learned with the community, which makes you a contributing member of the community, which makes you also a community asset, right? So when do you want to identify community assets? When you don't know what the assets are. Sounds kind of obvious, but it's 100% true. Sometimes you're going to step into a community, you've never been there before. It's a disaster relief program. Maybe you're one of those social workers showing up after a hurricane has ripped through, right, the southern peninsula of the United States. And you are saying, I've never been here before in my life, but these folks need help. What are the assets? What are we working with? What have we got, right, to contribute to solving this problem? When talent is underutilized, sometimes you're going to look at stuff and you're going to say, we have some brilliant people here, but for whatever reason in this organization, folks are put in spots where their strengths aren't being utilized, right? So let's talk about strengths for a second, assets of people and company, and let's talk about how our organization can put folks in roles where they are set to succeed, right, rather than fail. When are you unable to provide, when you are unable to provide traditional services? So folks, sometimes it's a lot different being a social worker in Los Angeles County and being a social worker in rural Alaska. It's a difference from being a social worker in Los Angeles County and being a social worker in Blythe, right, California on the Arizona border. There's a difference from that. Services are not the same everywhere you go. So if you're working in a community that's considered more rural, there's a number of assets still that exist within that community, a lot of strengths, right? That you can solve a lot of problems. You need to be very creative in how you do it, because there's not a government building or government funding, right, that's contributing to a solution to that problem. But we have to tap into the assets of the community, right? When you want to encourage pride among residents, when you want to be able to say, and you'll hear this a lot from communities that are empowered, right, and they're strong, to say, we can take care of this. We can take care of this because we are a community, right? And when you want to strengthen and build relationships. I don't know if any of you are like, I'm a car guy, right? So it's always pretty amazing when you are able to do something, make a repair or an upgrade, enhancement on your vehicle. And when you've done that in the process, you quickly realize you tackled a job that's a lot bigger than just you. And you got to call in a buddy, right, to come in and help you out. And it's amazing, right, that the friendship, the bond that can be created, tackling a project together like that. It's the same thing in community mapping. When a community can look back, stand back, and kind of observe that problem that they solve and say, check that out. We did that, right? It builds a lot of trust and camaraderie within a community. So it can be kind of fun to do. How do you identify community assets? Well, you want to consider the following things. How big is the community you're in, right? Who can do the work? How much time do you have? How much money do you have? Who do you, what will you do with the results, right, of mapping your community assets? These are basic questions that you want to ask, fairly straightforward, right? And then these are some reasons why or how you can use the assets, right? So once you've identified what are these opportunities, strengths, remember going back to SWOT analysis, but what are the physical assets, the businesses, the people, maybe it's the degrees, maybe it's the engineers, right? Maybe it's the teachers. Maybe it's the number of amazing volunteers who have a heart in your community, whatever the case is, right? Then you can use them to either tackle a new project. Maybe you're creating some new school curriculum. You can keep records of this and saying, folks, when you run into another issue, like another hurricane, right, hits this city, did you know that Bill down the street is an engineer and volunteers his time, right, with disaster relief, helping clear the clutter, right, out of a city and organizing efforts. So rather than pay an engineer tens of thousands of dollars to help offer input, go knock on Bill's door, right? Bill's wandering around trying to find somewhere to help. Go ask Bill to come help, right? So something to consider, right? So just a few reasons here on how you can use the assets. Now, I've talked to you a lot about a lot of abstract ideas, things that make a lot of sense when you hear them, but you're like, but what does that look like in everyday life? Dr. Mexico, what does this all come down to? Let me give you a 6-minute video of amazing work involving community asset mapping in Augusttown, Jamaica. This is an amazing little video here that talks about the power, though, of asset mapping in a community. And I'd like to share this with you. And then we will be closing out our lesson for today. All right. So let me share this with you. Actually, sorry, let me stop. I want to make sure I share the sound properly. I always have that concern. Okay, here we go.
Hi, my name is Karine Harris. I'm a member of the Augusttown community. Well, I'm involved in the Police Youth Club. I'm second vice chair for the Community Development Council, and I'm also involved in this mapping project. I think it's a really good thing. I mean, plotting the boundaries of Augusttown so as to determine what skills we have where and how we can develop those. I think it's a lovely thing. Personally, I'm a student at the UWI. I'm also a township scholar. My major is economics. Um, I have subjects from CXC and CAPE. Those are some of my skills. I can write, can talk. I'm good at, you know, interacting with persons. What my vision is for this community and what I hope this mapping can, help or enhance is a cohesiveness within the community. That persons feel more empowered and realize that, I don't need to go pick up violence. I don't need to just sit down and feel like, oh, I can't do nothing, or. I think this mapping will empower, I'm hoping that it will empower the community to really, move out in entrepreneurship or develop more skills or just do something for yourself. Yeah, that's my vision. Thanks.
My name is Dwayne Francis. I'm presently the PRO for the Better Garden Sports Culture and Community Development Club and also the PRO for the Greater Augusttown CDC. I enjoy computers. I'm a graphic artist for a couple of years now, and I do computer repairs also. A goal for the community. I would really love to see more young men getting involved into community activities and put down smoking and do more school stuff. That's it.
Hi, my name is Kimisha Foster. I'm a member of the Augusttown community of Augusttown Road to be exact. My long-term goal is to gain a college degree and in the end get a good job. My short-term goal is to get accepted in the midwifery program. My aim for the community is to create more jobs so that there will be less crime within the community so my daughter will be safe. Thank you.
I'm Nicholas Douglas, representing the Jamaica Diaspora Institute in Augusttown. Really giving thanks for this project. This project to me is all about bringing persons together, bringing persons who are involved in their community and love their community. For me personally, I'm in a lot of CBOs here, But my goal is really to see the community having persons from various professions being here, people feeling good, comfortable, at ease to live in my community, and my community moving like a modern community. You understand? Not the primitive idea, just moving in harmony and productive. We are so close to everything, why not be a part of it all? Thank you very much.
Blessed is the man that walketh not in the counsel of the ungodly, or sitteth not in the seat of the scornful. I mean, I say, I am Ricardo Williams. I'm a part of the community mapping in Augustown. And I just want to say that I hope this works out well for our community because I want to see the younger ones becoming something in life. And my assets are basically, I am a manager, I am a musician, I do music, music in its diversity, so to speak, in its entirety. So I want to be someone that encourages the younger ones to be what they want to be. I also want to help them with their finances. And as I said, my assets are basically musician, management. I am also a God-fearing person, humble. I am jovial. You understand? So, with God's willing, God's work, I hope that this thing will go out the way how we want it to. And due respect to Mr. Kalala and the agencies that are helping us with this project. You understand? So, give thanks.
Hey, my name is Simone Rutherford. I'm from the community of Augusttown, where I currently live on Bryce Hill Road. I attend the youth program, which is Youth Upliftment Through Employment, where I'm currently doing Data Up, level 1 and 2, where I've obtained a level 1 certificate in Data Up, and now I'm going for level 2. I also have a level 1 certificate in customer service from the Hartress NTA, and I'm a very jovial person. I like to socialize, I like to communicate, I also like to reason. I'm taking part in this community mapping to try and build my community and see how best I can help my community. That's me, bye.
Okay, so I wanted to share. Oh, let me put my face back up here. Sorry about that. All right, so I wanted to share this with you because I thought it was a really nice video that ties everything together. So if you saw the ABCDs, right, were present in this notion. You talked about that it was so beautifully represented, the notion of diversity, the notion of strengths, the notion that assets are not limited to only businesses or buildings or finances, but skill sets of people. And one of the things that I thought was really amazing about this particular example of community asset mapping has to do with the fact that in this video, you saw it was the community that was set forward. They were talking about their passions, their skill sets that they're applying, musicians and critical thought, right? And all of this amazing stuff. And what happened here is they were saying thank you to the organizations that were coordinating the efforts to map all of the assets in the community in order to basically log, to document, look, these are all the amazing people and skill sets we have in our community. So when something something exists that we need to either fix or address as a community, look to all of these assets, go to these folks and ask how they can help, knowing the assets they have. That's what a community asset map is. If you notice, it wasn't the agency saying, hey, we're coming in and we're coordinating these amazing efforts in Augusttown, right? And look at the amazing work that we're doing and look at our amazing degrees. No, they put the community first, right? In literally giving the community a voice, literally giving a voice. So I wanted to emphasize that because I just thought it was a nice way to wrap up, right, all of the content that I shared with you today. Now, drum roll, please, right? Here we are for our final activity for today. We're going to close out our lecture. And as you always know, in my classes, I kind of leave you with one image. I share with you one video. Sometimes it's short, sometimes it's medium in length. This is a relatively short one. If you notice, I've tapped into Father Greg a lot, Father Greg Boyle, this semester. And the reason why I wanted to do that is because as you start to unpack macro social work, you start to understand the power and magnitude, right, of social problems, of policy, and also that one individual who has a passion for seeing the good in everyone, right, can transform the realities for an entire community, for individuals, for the world, and how we look at how we treat people, right? I'm using an example of Father Greg Boyle. For this last content that I'm going to share with you today, I want to share with you 6 minutes of a commencement speech that Father Greg Boyle delivered, that really, I think, speaks to the heart. Remember, I talk about the balance of the head and the heart in social work, that speaks to the heart of macro practice. In order to preface that, I'd like you to take a look at the individual, this picture that's here on the screen. When you see this individual, I'd like you to consider, examine, right, this photo. And I'd like you to consider, what are your initial thoughts and impressions about this young man? What do you see? My hope is at the end of this course, right, after having taken Marge Pops and now taking macro social work, HIPC2 with this focus, I hope first that you see a person, that you see a human being, right, in front of you. A human being that maybe has experienced high levels of trauma, right, but a human being that deserves to be treated with the same respect and given the same opportunities as anyone else. Father Greg had often asked a question sometimes of folks that attended his workshops, putting a photo of several individuals, right, with similar features of tattoos and things like that up, and asking, which one would you throw away, right? Because that's a matter of what we do as a society when someone has made mistakes that we feel has made them less than another human being. We throw them away, we lock the key, we treat them differently, we don't allow them the same opportunities to seek employment, right, to live in a safe neighborhood, to live in a home, right? We deny them those, we throw them away. I hope that after this class, what you've taken from it is that everyone deserves dignity and respect, and it's us as social workers to change systems, to change society, to represent that, right, for everyone. So I want to close out with this final 6-minute speech from Father Greg. He's going to reference the individual in this photo. And I'd like to drive home the final point, and you've heard me say it multiple times in this lecture, that what HIPC2 has been all about, what macro social work is all about, is making those voices heard, as Father Greg says in this speech, for everyone, not for one person, right? Not for one county, not for one state, right? Not for one country, but for everyone, right? On this globe, right? When there is no peace, as we have forgotten, right, that we belong to one another. So let's go ahead and check out this final closing commencement speech with Father Greg Boyle. Okay, hold on one sec. All right, here we go. Sorry, let me do this again. All right, there we go.
It's been the privilege of my life for 30 years to have been taught everything of value by gang members. And in the last few years, they've taught me how to text, and so I'm really grateful to them, because I find it sure beats the heck out of actually talking to people. And I'm pretty dexterous at it, LOL and OMG and BTW, and the homies have taught me a new one, OHN, which apparently stands for, oh hell no. And I've been using that one quite a bit lately. My alma mater, Gonzaga University, called me and said they were gonna have a big talk on a Tuesday night with 1,000 people. And so I said, sure, and they said, can you bring 2 homies with you? And I always pick homies who have never flown before, just for the thrill of seeing gang members panicked in the sky. I've never picked anybody more terrified of flying than this guy, Mario. He was just absolutely petrified. In fact, he was hyperventilating. And we hadn't even boarded the plane yet. And then our flight crew arrives, and I see 2 flight attendants, females, and they both have very large cups of Starbucks coffee, and they're schlepping up the front steps. And Mario goes, when are we gonna board the plane? I said, as soon as they sober up the pilots. I should tell you that Mario, in our 30-year history at Homeboy, is the most tattooed individual who's ever worked there. His arms are all sleeved out, neck blackened with the name of his gang, head shaved, covered in tattoos, forehead, cheeks, chin, eyelids that say the end, so that when he's lying in his coffin, there's no doubt. And so I'd never been in public with him, and we're walking and people are like this and mothers are clutching their kids more closely. I'm thinking, wow, isn't that interesting? Because if you were to go to Homeboy on Monday and ask anybody there who's the kindest, most gentle soul who works there, they won't say me, they'll say Mario. He sells baked goods at the counter at our cafe. He's proof that only the soul that ventilates the world with tenderness has any chance of changing the world. So the nighttime talk comes and it's 1,000 people, and I invite them up to share their stories in front of all these people for 5 minutes each. They were terrified, but they did a good job. And honest to God, if their stories had been flames, you'd have to keep your distance, otherwise you'd get scorched. I invite them up for Q&A, and I said, yes, ma'am. And a woman stands and she says, yeah, I got a question. It's for Mario. First question out the gate. And Mario steps up to the microphone. He's a tall drink of water, skinny, and clutching the microphone, and he's terrified. Yes. And she says, well, you say you're a father and you have a son and a daughter who are about to enter their teenage years. What advice do you give them? What wisdom do you impart to them? And Mario clutches his microphone and he's just terrified and he's trembling and he's getting a hernia trying to come up with whatever the hell he's going to say when finally he blurts out, and he stops and he retreats back to his microphone clutching, terrified retreat. But he wants to get this whole sentence out. I just don't want my kids to turn out to be like me. And there's silence until the woman who asked the question stands, and now it's her turn to cry, and she says, why wouldn't you want your kids to turn out to be like you? You are loving, you are kind, you are gentle, you are wise. I hope your kids turn out to be like you. And 1,000 total perfect strangers stand, and they will not stop clapping. And all Mario can do is hold his face in his hand, so overwhelmed with emotion that this room full of people, strangers, had returned him to himself, and they were returned to themselves. And I think you go from here to stand with the demonized so that the demonizing will stop. And you stand with the disposable so that the day will come when we stop throwing people away. And you stand with those whose dignity has been denied, and you stand with those whose burdens are more than they can bear, and you stand with the poor and the powerless and the voiceless. Make those voices heard.
Okay. I hope that one of the things that you took from that amazing, right, speech was the message that you're standing up, right, for those whose legs have been taken out from underneath, right? You're standing up for those who have been historically thrown away. You know, you stand up for those who have been disgraced so that we don't disgrace anyone else, right? And the notion of this really comes down to this notion of making voices heard. My sincerest hope for you all is, as you go out and become social workers, when you talk about macro issues, when you talk about things like policy, when you talk about things like organizations and bureaucracy, you do not lose sight, right, that you're talking about those who have been marginalized, those whose voices have been taken, those who have been traumatized, right? You're standing with those individuals. You are making those voices heard, but you are yielding your voice, right? So that folks like Mario can give theirs. I want to make sure that when you talk about macro social work, you don't forget the heart, right? The soul of the work that you're doing. because it's really easy to get lost sometimes in macro social work dealing with policy and bureaucracy, that you forget, right, the actual people that you're trying to help. And so that's something that I wanted to leave you with. And finally, we'll go ahead and dive into our final activity for today. Okay. Now, in order to do this, I just need you to have a piece of paper. You all know where I'm going with this. Those of you who have taken classes before. Sorry, I'm looking for something. I was going to get an envelope, but I can't find one right now. So we'll do it like this, right? Let's do it like this. So I'm going to give you an example of one. You need an envelope, and on the envelope and a piece of paper. And what I'm going to ask you to do is you are going to write a letter to yourself. Now, if you've had class with me before, particularly last semester, if you've already given me your letter, you don't have to do this if you don't want. If you want to do this and you want to send a second letter, that's absolutely fine. And I'm happy to do that for you. No problem there. If this is your first time joining me for a class and you've not done this activity before, please know that I do this with every single class at the end of every single semester, because for me, I think it's essential for our students to have this experience. And I've never denied a student this experience to be able to do this. Now, here's what I'm going to ask. On this letter, I'm going to ask you to write just a short letter to yourself, handwritten, okay, on that piece of paper. And I'm going to ask you to address these following 4 questions for you. Now, here's what's important to understand with this letter. You're going to write this letter to yourself and you're going to seal it up in the envelope. And on the envelope, you'll see the stamp goes here, which would be on your right-hand side. You do not need to put a stamp on this. You get me your letter and I will take the stamp and I will put it on for you. Your tuition at work. You're welcome. Okay. In the middle of the envelope where you see this writing here, this is the address for where you want it to go. Here's what I'm going to ask you to do. I'm going to ask you to put an address for you, okay, on here. Now, it could be your personal address where you are now. Something to consider is if you anticipate moving or think you might move to another place, maybe you put the address of a relative, a friend, or a family member that you know will be there. All right, but you're going to put that there. When you're done answering these 4 questions, what I'm going to have you do is I'm going to have you seal up your envelope, okay, and give it to me. Now, you can give it to me in a couple of forms. When residency, God willing, we meet in person, then I'll happily take those from you at residency. If you would like to slide them under my office door, if you find yourself on campus one day, you can slide them under my office door. I'm in James 277, okay, 277. You can do that. Another way to do it is you can also send the letter with to California Baptist University, attention Dr. Mexico in the College of Behavioral and Social Sciences. You can send it, but you need to make sure to put your return address up here. The reason being in this corner opposite of the stamp. And the reason why you want to do that is because I need to see the address to send this to. Now, here's what's going to happen. 1 year from now, right, the end of spring semester, right, I'm going to mail you back your letters and you'll have an opportunity to read what you wrote at this moment in time. And for that reason, I'm asking you to fill out these 4 questions, right? What was one takeaway from this course that you want to remember throughout your career? What is one population you want to contribute to making their voices heard? What is one personal, academic, or professional challenge you overcame this semester that you are proud of? And write one message of encouragement for the future you 1 year from now. So maybe that's a scripture verse that you really love. Maybe that's a quote, right? Maybe it's something that a relative said to you. Whatever the case is, these letters, I do not read, I do not grade. This is for your own personal development. So whatever you send here is private and it just goes back to you. All right. I please want to extend that offer. I want to say, please take advantage of this. This is something that was done in my master's program that really transformed me as a person. And I want to give that opportunity back to you all. So that's there for you, okay, to take advantage of. So that is all I have. I'm going to ask you to do that. You can take time to write that letter on your own. You can put this on pause if you think you won't get to it later, and you can write your letter and then come back. But otherwise, here's what we're going to do. At the end of each semester, I also have a tradition of sharing one final poem with you that I think speaks beautifully to the notion of social work and ultimately of just being an amazing human being, right? And so I hope that you can carry this memory of this poem in your heart. This is a prayer that was written by Chief Tecumseh, who was of the Shawnee tribe, the Shawnee Nation of Native Americans. He was a warrior. He was also a leader in his community that led several revolutions against battles against the United States government as we encroached upon Native American land. And Chief Tecumseh said this prayer, which I think sums up ultimately our job as social workers, as children of Christ, and as Christians, of how it is we are to go about treating one another. So I'd like to leave you with this poem from Chief Tecumseh as one final thought for you all before I send you off, okay? So live your life that the fear of death can never enter your heart. Trouble no one about their religion, respect others in their view, and demand that they respect yours. Love your life, perfect your life, beautify all things in your life. Seek to make your life long and its purpose in the service of your people. Prepare a noble death song for the day when you go over the great divide. Always give a word or a sign of salute when meeting or passing a friend, even a stranger when in a lonely place. Show respect to all and grovel to none. When you arise in the morning, give thanks for the food and for the joy of living. If you see no reason for giving thanks, the fault lies only in yourself. Abuse no one and no thing, for abuse turns the wise ones to fools and robs the spirit of its vision. When it comes your time to die, be not like those whose hearts are filled with the fear of death, so that when their time comes, they weep and pray for a little more time to live their lives over again in a different way. Sing your death song and die like a hero going home. Folks, it has been an absolute pleasure having you all in class this semester. I really want to genuinely congratulate you for completing an essential and amazing and powerful step, right, towards acquiring and earning your MSW degree, right? You have completed a long journey in year one, but you have completed it nonetheless, right? Through the grace of God, you are here. And so I want to send you off with today's centering verse and activity, which is a classic scripture that I use at the end of every class, every semester, that I want to share with you. It's a scripture verse that we use in celebration to rejoice, because that is going to be your centering word for today, to rejoice. And it comes from Numbers chapter 6. May the Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord make his face shine on you and be gracious to you. The Lord lift up his countenance upon you and give you peace. Folks, I want to say thank you again. It has been fantastic. So let's go ahead and close out with this final centering activity for today. Go ahead and allow this blessing, right, coming from Numbers to enter into your heart, and allow God to speak into you the words of rejoice, or the word of rejoice today, okay? So let's go ahead and make sure our hands and feet are in a nice comfortable position. Let's press out all those memories, all those concerns, all those worries, right? And let's allow God to speak into us. Rejoice. Take time to rejoice over this amazing accomplishment that you all have made today. All right. Take a nice deep breath, close your eyes, and I will keep track of the time. Okay, go ahead and take that nice deep breath. Open your eyes. Come on back. Folks, it is a pleasure, and at the same time, it's a bittersweet occurrence to say thank you one last time to you all, as well as farewell, right? That's me in the bottom there with a little tear, right? Because as happy as I am for you, I am also sad to see you all go, but know that maybe, hopefully, our paths may cross again in another path. But if I see you on campus, you're welcome to say hi, welcome to come and give me a hug, right? I'm happy to see you all, and I'm looking forward to seeing you all in person. But I want to say thank you. Congratulations again. It has been an absolute honor. Congratulations on completing HIP C2. All right. And I will see you all soon. Take care. Farewell. God bless.